The Spider-Man Homecoming trailer is out and it's got all of our senses super tingly. What better time than to do a deep dive into the villains appearing in the film this morning on Screen Junkies News. Hey Internet, we are so excited to be doing this today. This is Screen Junkies News. We are going to be talking about the three major villains that are going to be appearing in Spider-Man Homecoming. I'm Hector Navarro. We've got with us an expert Spider-Man panel. Trust me, I've vetted them. I've tested them myself. They are good to go. To my left, Mr. Justin Lamb, producer here at Screen Junkies News, and to his left, writer of Honest Trailers, as well as the host of Flash and Friends, Mr. Joe Starr. Guys, we're here to bring it. Let's get right into it. Let's name the three villains that we're talking about today, just to give everybody that info up front, and then we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive.
All at the same time?
All at the same time.
Okay.
I'll take one, you take the second one, you take the third one.
Great,
Okay,
I love this.
ready? 1, 2, 3. The Vulture.
The Shocker.
The Tinkerer.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, all right, let's talk about the Vulture for a second. The Vulture has a long history with Spider-Man. He's an iconic villain in the Spider-Man mythos. Almost appeared in a movie, but not yet. But the Vulture is going to be played by Mr. Michael Keaton.
Yes.
I love it.
By my Batman.
Exactly.
Your
Your
Batman, my Batman.
Many people's Batman. My Batman's Kevin Conroy, but a fantastic Batman nonetheless. It's Michael Keaton, who is... how do you guys feel about this casting?
I love this casting because I think so much of what Adrian Toomes is, the man who is the Vulture, I think so much of what is great about that character and the way that he's portrayed in comics is his sort of like, you know, his obsession, his sort of, he's a man who's very kind of like obsessed with his need to be kind of like, to be right. And Keaton brings, you know, he has that great intensity. I'm thinking of that, like, you want to get nuts moment?
Yeah.
And I just can't wait, because we've seen so much of great, you know, sort of, you know, second coming of Michael Keaton now. With Birdman, he had a great kind of intensity to him, and there were glimpses of that.
And then we see him again in Spotlight, and he's been in back-to-back Oscar winners. He's going to be showing up in The Founder soon.
Yeah, and again, very grounded, but I want to get nuts. I want to see Keaton get nuts, and I'm excited for that with the Vulture.
Absolutely. Joe, what do you
I'm
think?
so excited for just this like younger ensemble to work with a dude like Keaton. Like that's such a cool opportunity for just a veteran of screen and stage to just work with these kids, sort of teach them what he knows. You know, Ben Kingsley had an opportunity to do this in the original Tobey Maguire run of Spider-Man
Almost
films.
in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
Almost in Spider-Man 3.
And
John Malkovich, almost in Spider-Man 4.
That's right.
But then it was canceled in lieu of the reboot that we got, The Amazing Spider-Man.
And to be fair, I think Spider-Man 3 had room for one more villain in it.
Sure.
2, 3, throw them all in.
Yeah, just an entire Sinister Six would have been fine. But yeah, I think he's going to kill this. We've already seen that Tom Holland is a quippy, fun kid, and him and Keaton are just going to bounce off each other so well.
Speaking of Tom Holland had a quote that I want to pull up when he's describing the first time that we see the Vulture in the film. He says, the first time we see the Vulture is terrifying. It's like a horror movie, really scary, really intense, and shocking, which is really exciting. And Joe, I'm also glad that you brought up the fact that there's a young cast in this, because the thing that's really exciting about this iteration of Spider-Man Peter Parker is that he's young, is that he's being played as a 16-year-old kid, being played by a young actor. I think Tom Holland's 19, maybe 20. And the cool thing is that the Vulture represents this side of Spider-Man villains, which is age versus youth. Age versus youth is a theme that is explored in his comics and his stories for decades. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, is another character that they really lean into that with that character. However, in the previous iterations of Spider-Man, he's been in his 20s, and Norman Osborn was maybe in his 40s, 50s. Like, they don't really hit the sort of age versus youth dynamic as much as they can with the Vulture, who normally looks like a very, very old man. Let's be honest.
He usually looks like Mr. Burns.
He looks like Mr. Burns, yeah.
And I want to ask a question, because so much of the Vulture's villainy in multiple mediums, whether it's the cartoon or the comics, have focused on his quest for youth and sort of like stealing the youth of Spider-Man. Do you think we're going to see any of that in Homecoming?
I mean, I personally don't think so, but in case people aren't aware, this is the info we're dropping. The Vulture has had at one point in his comic book history, and even the cartoon show, these quests for youth, and they've not euthanized him, they've made him younger.
They've euthanized him.
Through sci-fi processes,
Crazy.
you know, science fiction, he's gotten like a tablet that allows him to drain and suck the youth out of people. They've done that to make him more of like a physical threat to Peter Parker, because, you know, Spider-Man has powers, he can lift a taxi, and here comes this guy who who has an electromagnetic harness that he built that allows him to fly and kind of gives him enhanced super strength, but not really. So they've done that. I don't see them going that route with this character because of all the different versions of the Vulture. He was one of the founding members of the Sinister Six. He has had some great runs where he has like that cool black and red costume with the Mark Millar run. He has had, he's been diagnosed with cancer. He's got a strong friendship with Electro, Max Dillon in the comic book. So him and Electro are like a partnership. All the different iterations of the Vulture that you can take. In the cartoon show, he was voiced by Robert Englund in The Amazing Spider-Man, or Spectacular Spider-Man. Spectacular Spider-Man voiced by Freddy Krueger himself. I think the best Vulture is this older guy, that when they play up that energy, I'm an older, but I'm still like a mental threat. He's a genius. He's a engineering genius. Now, question for you, Joe. Do you think that they will tie Adrian Toomes, Michael Keaton's character, in with the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, maybe Stark Industries? Because we know Tony Stark's appearing in the movie.
Well, I think the easier jump to make here is obviously tying him to the Tinkerer. This is the guy who's responsible for all this street level villainous tech. I'm making a sort of a leap in order of video here, but I think that's the guy who they're really going to tie him to is the Tinkerer. This is going to be an old guy who needs the enhancement of these wings. I think, even though in the comics, the Vulture, he's an electrical engineer, he's a genius, he built his own wings. I think in this, they're going to anchor everyone around the Tinkerer, because I think you can only have so many inventors running around the MCU.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's going to be focused around him and sort of moving into our next villain, too. I think we're seeing a through line here between the villains Peter's going to be facing and sort of how they're getting their technology, essentially.
Well, let's go ahead and just jump into the next villain. Let's just do it. Well, let's talk about the Shocker.
Let's talk
before we move over to the Tinker. The Shocker. Here he is on the right in his full comic book glory, and on the left he's being played by actor Bokeem Woodbine, who was recently seen in Fargo. He's been in Riddick. He was in the Total Recall remake, and it was announced that he was cast in June from The Hollywood Reporter. And he was also briefly in the Blade TV series. This is not technically his first comic book thing.
He was also one of the Navy SEALs in The Rock.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great. So Bokeem is a fantastic actor, and this is the first time we're seeing the Shocker in a movie. I mean, this is the first time we're seeing any of these characters in a movie, but the Shocker, Justin, tell us a little bit about the Shocker and his personality as a character. Who is this guy?
Well, he's sort of like one of my favorite categories of villains, which is like a guy that's got like a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. And I think some people probably would regard him as a character who has kind of a lesser array of powers. He's got the gauntlets, which are these sort of like vibrational forces. I definitely think that when they get together for a supervillain picnic, he's probably the guy that everyone's like, oh gosh, Shocker's coming.
Gotta invite Shocker.
Oh God. And I love that. I think that when you pair somebody that already has a little bit of an inferiority complex
big time.
with any sort of like additional powers, it's already makes for a great character dynamic. And Bokeem, he does such a great job. I don't know if you guys have watched Fargo.
I haven't yet, no.
He's great in it.
Oh,
it's such a great mix of menace, threat, but like a little bit of charisma at the same time. And I'm really interested to see what he does with this character. I think it's going to be a very, very cool take on a character that, honestly, like you said, we've never seen any of these guys on screen. And I'm like, let's get some new guys from the Rogues Gallery in there and see what we can do with them.
I was, when I saw Shocker, I was like, really? We're leading with Shocker?
Yep.
Okay. But then finding out that Woodbine is playing him, I'll watch this guy do anything. I think this is going to be really cool. Also, with another through line with the Tinker, they both have Punisher issues.
Yes.
So I'm sure that for like the next year or two, we'll be throwing up plenty of videos that say Spider-Man Defenders connection ? But yeah, this is a guy I like Shocker because he's an underdog in his own right, and as we sort of see in the comics, he's a zero that sort of turns into a criminal hero. He eventually becomes like a big shot in the criminal underground. He's a guy that wants respect.
Yeah, he's at one point dubbed the Don of the New York underworld by Silvermane, by Alfredo Silvermane, who is right here is in full-on comic book mode, but normally he's also just like a mobster, an older, mobster gentleman in Spider-Man New York comics. And this guy, Shocker, man, he is absolutely the epitome of C-list or D-list character. But writers have been able to do so much fun stuff with him. He was in the Superior Foes of Spider-Man, which was a fantastic run, exploring his severe anxiety and inferiority complex. He has severe confidence issues. like we were mentioning the Punisher, he's afraid that a character like the Punisher is going to kill him because the Punisher takes out supervillains. He's been afraid of the Scourge of the Underworld. The Scourge of the Underworld is another Marvel villain that would like a vigilante that took guys out. Yeah, this guy he was a brilliant engineer who was a high school dropout and decided to just start, robbing banks after when he was in jail, created these gauntlets that provided force that were through vibrations. Just a straight up, just a career criminal, just a guy who just wants money, respect, all that stuff.
Yeah, he just wants to climb the ladder.
Which he did in the
ladder.
comics. It's kind of like, it seems silly, but it's like, yeah, you know what? He really climbed that ladder.
Get on your shocker.
And he's a guy you can root for because anytime a bunch of superheroes show up, he's the first guy to go, no, I can't fight with these guys, and leaves. Like, he does not try to fight super powered individuals, and these other criminals try to do that. He's like, no, I know when I'm outclassed. Bye.
Yeah, and I think with the amount of that people love shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad, these guys sort of climbing that scumbag ladder.
Yeah.
I think he's a character that is going to be able to build a lot of momentum in these movies.
I agree. It seems like the role he's going to play in Spider-Man Homecoming is going to be similar to Paul Giamatti as the Rhino in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, who's like a book-ending, shows up really quickly, gets taken out by Spider-Man villain, except that this character perfectly encapsulates what that role is, that really pathetic guy. Let's move on to our next villain. Here's a really interesting character we haven't seen yet, and we can talk a little bit about what kind of role he's going to have in the film, the Tinkerer. The Tinkerer, Phineas Mason, is an obscure Spider-Man villain who is essentially a tech supplier. This is a guy who is revealed to be the person who is funding, much like an evil Tony Stark, a lot of technology and suits for various villains. He designed the suits for Mysterio. He designed the scorpion tail that Mac Gargan wore as the Scorpion. Here's just a really quick list of a bunch of really crappy Spider-Man villains that he supplied some sort of tech for.
Beta tested on these
Rocket
guys.
Racer, Big Wheel, Goldbug, Whirlwind, Diamondback, not the one from Luke Cage, a different Diamondback. Grizzly, who's a guy in a grizzly bear suit. Hammerhead. The Beetle, the Black Cat, Jack-O-Lantern, the Owl, and the Constrictor.
And who can forget Big Wheel?
Who can forget Big Wheel, who's a guy in a big wheel?
Yeah.
Spider-Man comics are awesome.
How does he pitch these to the villains? It's like, all right, what do you got for me? Hear me out.
Yeah, hear me out.
Your name is Big Wheel.
You know what I think
get
is,
in this wheel.
I don't know if Phineas Mason has the gear before or if pathetic guys come in and they go, I did a drawing that's a wheel.
I want to be a wheel.
I want to be a wheel.
I
a big wheel. He's like, all right, I'll design this stupid
big
thing.
one.
The
But
other
like a big
day,
one.
it was Halloween. I was walking around. I saw a jack-o'-lantern. I was thinking, what if I was a jack-o'-lantern?
So I want to hypnotise people, right? But with disco, right? He's like, hypno hustler, got it.
Yeah,
Here's your gear.
Here's your
I want to be
thing.
Diamondback, but not the Luke Cage one.
Exactly.
We'll do it. It's fine.
I want to throw diamonds. So this guy, Phineas T. Mason, is interesting because along with the Vulture, one of Spider-Man's earliest villains. I mean, this is Homecoming and it's technically a reboot. And now you can argue that these villains are not the cream of the crop Spider-Man villains like Dr. Octopus or the Green Goblin, who we've seen in films before. But technically, the Vulture and the Tinkerer appeared first in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 2 way back in 1963. They've even beat the Shocker, who appeared in Amazing Spider-Man, what was it, 46 from 1967. So, but these guys are old school guys.
Yeah.
Old school guys.
And they're leaning so hard into just old school classic Spider-Man with the web wings and just the look, the small eyes. Like, I mean, this fits tonally.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think to build on that, Dan Murrell said the other day on the show, when we were talking about the web wings, he was like, and you guys know, you read a great Spider-Man comic and it's like, he gets up in the morning, he's stopping a bank robbery, he's going to school, he's getting it home at night, and I'm going to throw this out there, I'm going to build on that. I would be absolutely fine if Spider-Man Homecoming took place over the course of one day, the day of the big homecoming dance, and this is all of the stuff he has to deal with before he can get to the big dance to get that dance with whoever he's paired up
it's
with.
classic Spider-Man.
I mean, it's like, and he's a kid, he's in high school. I would love that. He's stopping the Shocker in the morning. The Tinker's supplying tech. We're dealing with the Vulture before the dance. He makes it to the dance just in
that
time.
corsage, though.
Yep.
Because of that Parker luck.
Peter, that old Parker
luck.
Exactly.
I would love that. That's a movie I feel like I could watch on loop.
Absolutely.
So-
and I think that when we're talking about the Tinkerer, the role he plays is a background, a tech supplier guy, but it's somebody who you could bring through in many different Spider-Man films. It's not a one and done. You have to kill him like we do with normally superhero movies. And you got a great actor. Michael Chernus is playing him. If you want to throw up that picture of the Tinkerer and the actor playing him, you know him from Orange is the New Black.
So great.
He's a Juilliard-trained actor, and this is his first major comic book role. And again, this is an actor who looks different than the character in the comic book. Bokeem Woodbine looks different than the Shocker, who's white in the comic books. Michael Keaton's pretty spot on casting, but a lot of the actors, even the young actors are playing. We've got Ned Leeds and Flash Thompson. Those actors look vastly different from their comic book iterations.
Planting a little seed there, by the way, with Ned.
Absolutely.
Like, goes on to become
the Hobgoblin, maybe. We're planting some seed with Flash Thompson.
Yeah.
Maybe he's going to become Venom, Guardians of the Galaxy. There's so many potential seeds that we're planting. But Phineas T. Mason, what else do we need to tell the audience about this before we wrap up?
Well,
here?
I think a big seed worth talking about was one of my favorite Marvel moments of I don't know, maybe the past decade or so was when they did a run called Secret War,
yes,
which is not the original old 70s, everyone's on one planet together.
But it was a Nick Fury discovered something.
And
what was it?
They had this fantastic reveal because the Tinkerer is such a goofy, made Big Wheel and Goldbug. And they took this fantastic angle on it where they found out that the Tinkerer was being funded by an outside government, which meant that this was no longer goofy villain of the week crime, it was terrorism.
Yes.
And that was just such a...
But what was the government, Joe?
It was
Who was that?
A little place called Latveria.
Get out of town. Dr. Doom's country, Dr. Doom's home country, and the Countess who took over for Dr. Doom was also part of this thing that was funneling money to the Tinkerer and all these different villains. Of course, Marvel Studios does not have the rights to Dr. Doom or Latveria.
But we've said that about Spider-Man before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's a potential seed that you could plant there to play out that kind of story. I think, man, Nick Fury in like a Secret War movie would be boss.
I would absolutely.
Sam Jackson, come on.
Stealth covert team. They've got to go undercover in Latveria. If that's a thing they could at some point in time work out, I don't know if they would.
It was Captain America, Daredevil. I think it was Quake.
In her
Wolverine.
That was
Spider-Man.
Pretty much not her debut, but that was.
It was.
Was that Quake's
Ryan
debut?
Michael Bendis, and it was Quake's debut. So they could tie all that together with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., all that stuff. Is there anything else from the comic books that was cool of note for the Tinkerer? I think we could talk about Civil War for a second, guys.
He is. I mean, he's aged substantially in the comics. I believe his grandson was he was one of the victims of the incident from Civil War.
An elementary school kid was killed in this explosion, and it led to a really interesting story that dealt with the Tinkerer. That kid's father is also a comic book character in his own right. The Tinkerer's son is named Rick Mason, who is called Agent, who's like a top-level spy. And even though he's a good guy for the government, him and his father, who's a bad guy, tech guy who supplies stuff to villains, they still like love and respect one another, and they'll meet for lunch and stuff like that. So they have this really interesting dynamic. Does that mean we're going to bring in that eventually the Tinkerer's son is going to be some sort of like S.H.I.E.L.D. agent or a spy? I don't know, but they could do that if they wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we always sort of circle back to the conversations of how will they connect, but with someone like the Tinkerer, with Chernus playing him, this is not with respect to Chernus, he's not Robert Downey Jr. So like this is a guy who has come from TV, he's like a lower scale guy playing a lower scale villain.
Yeah.
That's a villain that could slide really perfectly into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah. You know what? That's an excellent point. And not only that, but what's so exciting about these characters, with maybe the exception of the Vulture, is that because they're so obscure, you can do so many different things with them. And there's so many exciting possibilities, and people's expectations will not only be met but exceeded because we don't have any going into this. Like, what expectations do people have for the Tinkerer? None. So Chernus is going to knock it out of the park.
Yeah, backing off of those iconic sort of like big deal heroes, it's like we're not holding it up against Alfred Molina as Doc Ock.
Absolutely. Or even if they attempted, like, we're going to do Venom and Carnage in this movie, all the 90s bros would come out like, it better be perfect. It's like, whoa. Let's ease in with Shocker and the Tinkerer.
Yeah.
And then we'll get to that.
And I quite frankly, with the MCU, I think we're hungry for good villains.
Yes.
Because, I mean, they've burned through so many A-list villains already because they keep done and wanting all of their villains. So here we're taking a chance with a guy like the Vulture and the Shocker. And we can really sort of let these guys run with this and, see if they take off.
Here's hoping that they keep Michael Keaton's Vulture alive in this film so that he can show up in their version of the Sinister Six.
I say, his Tinkerer wind up, if he escapes, they're planting those seeds in the Garfield Spider-Man for there to be that Sinister Six, all those weapons. Maybe the Tinkerer becomes the source for that stuff, and we're seeing a lower-fi cobbled together
For
six.
a second, I was like, when did I miss the Garfield Spider-Man crossover?
Yeah, it was really good.
They did Spider Island.
Revenge of the Mondays.
Peter
green
Parker
screens.
hates Mondays, but also loves lasagna. So that was great. So guys, that's our take on Screen Junkies News' take on the Spider-Man villains that are appearing in Spider-Man Homecoming. Is there anything that we missed? Is there anything you guys want to talk about? Go ahead and comment below. You can always be tweeting at us at SJ News. Big thanks to Justin and Joe for coming and hanging out. And you guys can always be watching more videos right here. And we will see you tomorrow with more Screen Junkies News stuff. Bye.